Recording's in progress. So the agenda, so I'll go through a bit of a recap of last week. We'll go through the collection types. So we're still on historic photographs. So this is obviously part 2, and the cataloguing focus for this week. So we're going to be looking at relationships, references, context, provenance, and acquisitions. And then we'll have a bit of a question time and a review of where we're up to at the moment. So the recap, so the Burke collection, or the Burke Museum collection, has over 3,000 historic photographs. So they include daguerreotypes, stereoscopic photographs, postcards, carte de visite, I always say that slightly wrong, so I do apologise, and photographic negatives. So I'll also run through some of those fields that we went through last week. So the identification, so that unique identifier that links an item to its information. Hopefully through Victorian collections this week, you've got a more firm grasp on the identifier, as well as some of those other numbers that are found through the cataloguing worksheets and found on the photographs themselves that could potentially be a unique identifier, either a legacy number or another number that's been linked to this item. So the media is the digitized item. So that's the digitized photograph in this case. So it's a digital copy of the photograph as well as the catalogue worksheets. The description, so this is the physical characteristics of the item. So it looks like so far you've got a pretty firm grasp on this, but feel free to ask any questions at the end of the workshop as well. So the location, this is the physical location, so the physical item and where it is kept in our collection stores. The research, so this is research and speculative notes about the item. So it includes references to sources of information. So anything where the photograph might have been published or where a research paper was done on the item in focus. So the notes, so once again, I'll reiterate, this is all information that falls outside of the other fields. So feel free to put questions in here or notes that need to be followed up. A lot of the time it'll be if we need to follow up with the physical item. So say the dimensions of a photograph, if either there are none in the catalogue worksheets or our associated information, or they're inconsistent between catalogue information sources, anything like that will go in the notes field. And admin was just me showing you how we control who accesses the records from the internal side as well as the public-facing side. So the historic photographs, I thought I'd do a little bit more of a run through of each of these types that are in our collection. So we'll start with the daguerreotypes. So a daguerreotype is an early form of photography. So it was invented by the French artist and photographer Louis Daguerre. And of course, that is the namesake for the daguerreotype. So in 1839, it produces a unique, highly detailed image on a silver-coated copper plate. The process involves treating the plate with iodine vapors to make it light sensitive, exposing it to light in a camera, and then developing it in mercury vapors. So these are very heavy metals and very toxic to humans, and they're a very unique form of photograph. So the resulting image is fixed in a salt solution, and the daguerreotypes are prized for their clarity and fine detail. So they're one of a kind. You can't replicate in the way that you do, say, with photographic negatives or other types. So they were very popular in the mid-19th century, especially for portraiture, as you see in this photograph here. And a lot of the time, they'll be in protective little cases. So they're wonderful antiques that you do find from time to time, but less and less, of course, as we move through time. So then we also have these stereoscopic photographs. So these are the double images. I believe all of you have at least one record that is a stereoscopic image. So they're taken with a special camera that will take 2 very similar photos of the one subject. And then when viewed with a stereoscopic contraption, it gives the impression that it's a 3D image. So this was made popular in around the mid-19th century, mainly in the USA and across Europe, a lot of Western Europe. So around the UK, it was a very popular item. This was generally printed on quite standard photographic paper, but you do get a little bit of variation. A lot of them these days you will find also mounted onto card, so stuck onto card, and then they're able to be viewed with a stereoscopic viewer. So we also have the postcard. So the idea of the postcard, it's interesting looking into the research of the origin. There's a couple of claims, but it does seem likely that around the mid-19th century, one of the first ever postal cards was from the Austrian government. And the postcard, as you very likely know, is a thick piece of card, and it's typically rectangular, designed with an image on one side and a space for writing and sending it outside of an envelope through the postal service. Usually, as I said, it usually features a picture on the front. It'll have the recipient's address and postage on the other side. So then we also have the carte de visite. So this was a form of very small photograph. It was generally around the size of a business card, and it was made popular around the 1854 mark, and with steadily rising popularity through the next sort of 2 decades. So a lot of these days, a lot of the time you'll find these in albums, so people will have a collection of carte de visite, and they'll also be something that is very commonly mounted on some kind of backing card, normally just a firm paper-based card. And then we have the photographic negatives. So these are still in use today, but a photographic negative is an image typically captured on film or glass, where the colors and the brightness levels are inverted relative to the original scene. So it's said to have originated once again around the 19th century. And in a negative, so the dark areas are light, the light areas are dark. This reversed image can then be used to produce positive prints where the tonalities are restored to their correct values. So it's become very popular once color photography became possible. So around the early 20th century, and it became possible for amateur photographers as well as professional. So it's something that's still around today, and depending on your age, you very much might remember these from the old school cameras of not that long ago. And so from there, we'll jump across to our cataloging focus. So as I said, today, we're going to be looking at relationships, references, context, provenance, and acquisitions. So I'll first give you an overview run through in slides, and then I'll run you through the process in Victorian collections using an example record. So first, we've got relationships. This is something that is used in different ways by different institutions, but generally speaking, you'll have a parent record and a child or children records. So an example of this would be a tea set in a collection. So the tea set as a whole would be the parent, and then each individual part, so the teapot, the cups, the saucers, would each be their own child record or child item. And there's a little bit of difference, say with a tea set, you'll have a physical parent, so you can look at a tea set in its entirety. But when we're looking at photographs, a lot of the time you'll have a virtual parent with no physical parent. So this will be when there's copies of photographs that have been created in a digital space, but aren't necessarily all physical items in their own right. And then we have related records. So related records are when they don't fall into that category of overall parent and individual child, but have links to each other. So this could be through factors like the time period, so or the style, or a lot of the time it'll be the donor. So this is an interesting one that I'm still, I guess, coming up with my decision-making matrix and working out what decisions I'm going to make when it comes to creating parent records for photographs for the Burke Museum. There's a lot of inconsistency about whether we will have a virtual parent or whether it will only be as you've seen with identifiers, and a session number or an identifier point 1, point 2, point 3, but without a parent that is linking all of those child records to each other. So I'd absolutely love your input as well, because this is a work in progress for me. And next we have our references. So these references, different again to the research field. These are the resources that we're using specifically to build these catalogue records. So it's making sure there's a track record of how we're obtaining the information that we are when it is not in the catalogue worksheets. So here's an example that I put of one of our records. So this is, as you can see, just showing, and really the valuable things are the title, and these are fields you can add to, and a link if it's online, so that people can very easily navigate back and check in with the resources you've used. So then we also have context. So this one, I guess, is a little bit more meaty. This is very much our research component. So the contextual or historic information is where you'll need to start looking for those resources that will become part of your references. So we are looking for the item's background, any historical events, themes, anything that, I guess, makes the story significant and why it's part of our collection. So this is a free text, so it will be a bit of a larger summary than some of the other areas. Then we also have the subjects. So subjects are absolutely essential for people's ability to search within Victorian collections. The more subjects that you put that are specific to the item you have, so not generic ones, for example, photograph, but something very specific about the content or the history of the item that you're cataloguing. Putting in these keywords will be words that are searchable later. So when you're doing a bit of a lateral search and you're sort of trying to get hits based on those keywords that you think are likely linked to the information you would like to find in Victorian collections, these become really valuable. So then we go down to the statement of significance. So this is, we like a straightforward statement. It's very much the significance, why we care about this item. So whether it's the historic moment, say for a photograph that it's capturing, or the link that it has to place, so to either the Burke Museum, to Beechworth, or the surrounding area. But it is very much a answer to why do we care. I would highly recommend reading the significance resources in Trello as well for this one. So we have primary significance. So it is the core value, the importance of an item based on the inherent qualities and attributes. This is also a drop-down list, so we'll have some options we'll look at in Victorian collections. And then there's the comparative significance. So this is compared to other items in the collection. So looking at that uniqueness specific to the item that you're cataloguing. So then we have provenance. So this is the life and the story of that life of the item that you're cataloguing. So it's documenting the history of the item's ownership and custodianship. So it's all the way from its creation to it landing in the collection. So a lot of these, unfortunately, are unknown for our collection. There's the transition from the paper-based or non-digital way of processing collection information to that transition to digital is quite a rocky road. So a lot of this information still needs to be transferred in and is at the moment not just in one place, so we don't have this accessible. So when unknown, totally fine for it to be unknown. You don't need to put anything in there. But when it is known, there's options like parties, which will be their records in their own right that link to these collection records, but they are records that are specific to a person or a donor or an owner. They can be the creator as well, so anyone that is linked to this item. So then we also have places. So relatively straightforward. We like to know whenever possible where an item was created. And the events. are any records, any activities or changes throughout the life of an item. So this could be when it goes on display, as well as when it was created, or any uses that it may have had over time before landing in the collection, as well as once we start using them. So then we get to acquisition. So this is how we acquired the item. A lot of the time, once again, this information is unknown. And when it's unknown, it's unknown. But whenever possible, we like to put this information in because it will also inform, we'll be able to communicate the status and justify collection items a lot easier if ever a review were to come to look back through the collection. So the acquisition details are a record of anything that we know about how it came into the collection. A lot of the Burke Museum items were donated. So if we have details about who donated them, whether we've communicated the acceptance into the collection back to those people, or if we haven't, as well as any detail that might explain why an acquisition happened the way that it did. So that's a sort of overview of these areas that I will give you a little bit more detail in an actual record. So I thought we'd go from the same image that I focused on. Can everyone see the Victorian Collections page? Is that, yeah, fantastic. So I thought I'd give a bit of a run through. So this is the same image that is Tom Parkinson and Sid Evans in their now very famous wheelbarrow push up to the chalet of Mount Buffalo. So it was a wager that was made in a pub on Anzac Day in 1935. So Tom here said that he thought he could push Sid Evans from the Beechworth post office all the way up to the chalet at Mount Buffalo in a wheelbarrow. So Sid said he didn't think it could happen. So they wagered about £20. And then they trained for 3 weeks in different ways. Apparently Sid was training in sitting for long periods of time, while Tom was using a wheelbarrow and lugging an incredible amount of items just around town or anywhere he could get to. And then they were off. So this has become quite a delightful Beechworth story, as well as inspired a lot of fundraising events in modern times. So I thought it was quite a nice story, as well as quite a nice photo itself. So we'll run through some of these. I'll show you a little bit that I've added. So for the description, so this is my very basic description, that it is a black and white portrait orientated rectangular reproduced photograph printed on matte photographic paper. I got this information from the catalogue worksheets. This one is lucky enough to have 2. So it also gave me a lot of registration numbers that were able to be added into the other identifiers. But the reason, even though in here, I'll run through this as well, we have inscription details. So is it on here? Or did I just jump past it? So even though the inscription and markings actually have text, I can't see them here. They could potentially be faded, but this very much looks like the identifier. But for that reason, I put in a note instead. So I'm sending this to myself in the future to say you have to check the physical, because this is a copy. And so it might be that that inscription is on the original photograph and not this copy. So just a bit of an explanation there. But if we jump down to relationships, so as you can see, this is 6512.6. It also says in the worksheet, it has ticked that it's a copy. So I know this isn't the original that we have. And I also know from reading one part of it, oh, where did it go? Sorry, I've forgotten exactly where it says. So there's copy from original enlargement, but I am sure that it also says that this is from the Ovens and Murray Advertiser. Feel free to yell out if you see it on the page.
It's up the top there,
Is it?
in the third line.
Here. Thank you so much. So the photograph from the Ovens and Murray Advertiser 1935. Thank you for that. I have no idea why I couldn't see it. But that is a newspaper that has been running since 1855 and is still running today, and it's a local newspaper. So this very likely was a bit of advertising, which a lot of people, with their permission, asked if they could raise money for different causes along the way. So this is very likely a promotional image. So I'll go to relationships and I'll show you. So here, what I would suggest that that you do with all of your records is run a bit of a search and just see if there is a virtual parent. So if you use these, oh gosh, my brain, I'm going to call them stars. I'm so sorry. But to surround your identifier, so I would just do to there and run the search just to see how many records come up. So if, say, there was a record that was 6512.1 dash any amount of number, then that would be enough for me to consider that once jumping in, checking that it is referring to the same photograph or the same event, that this is a virtual parent, and then you can link it to this record. If there isn't one found, don't create one, because once again, this is a little bit of grey area that I don't want to be too hasty with. So if we don't have one, perfectly fine. We move on to related records. You can do the exact same thing here. So if there was a record that was also about the wheelbarrow push, then I would be adding it here and searching something along the lines of wheelbarrow or any other keyword that I thought might bring up something. So in these cases, I could add the souvenirs. So I won't show you the images now, but a lot of these are things like promotional flags that came out and were sold along the way while this event was occurring. But at the moment, once again, this is a bit of a grey area in the way that we use this field. So I would only use the related records if it was a very strong and clear connection, which for the records that you've been given for this week is not the case. So for now, I think it's best to note this one, but not actually attach any other records to the records that you've been given. And then we go on to references. So for the references, I would actually reverse the way that you use this in cataloging, because it's going to be a lot easier to know what you're referencing once you've done your research for the context. But the references are quite straightforward. You add the title, the URL. In here, I actually wouldn't add anything to these two for now, because once again, this has been quite inconsistently used in the Burke Museum cataloging. And so I would just put in the title and the URL. So places like Trove, that's quite easy to do. Say this is a news article that I found from the time talking about this wheelbarrow push or trip or derby or any of the other terms that they like to use. But down on this side here, you can see this says site. They've made it really easy. So I would actually just copy and paste from here the title and all the way down. I probably wouldn't add retrieved when, but all the way up to the page number. And then in the URL, you can also copy and paste this information directly from the website. So Trove is fantastic for this. Some websites are going to be very different, but really it's just a copy and paste from up here, as I'm sure you would have done at least once before, and you'll be able to paste into here. So for the contextual information, I've written a little, I thought instead of watching me write it, I've just written up a little spiel just as an example. So for this, I've tried to keep it specific to the photograph itself. So said this is a copy of a photograph originally published in Ovens and Murray Advertiser 1935. I haven't yet found which publication. So for now, just directly Ovens and Murray Advertiser 1935 is enough to give the nod. And using those references, I'll be able to start linking in where I've sourced information. But this is from the catalogue worksheet. So it depicts the Barrow Men, which is what they've affectionately become known as. So Tom Parkinson and Sid Evans with a wheelbarrow. In June 1935, Beechworth's local garage proprietor, Tom Parkinson, and Sid Evans, licensee of the Post Office Hotel, undertook a wheelbarrow push from Beechworth Post Office to the chalet at Mount Buffalo. The event originated with a £20 wager made on Anzac Day 1935, with Tom Parkinson betting that he could push Sid Evans from Beechworth to Mount Buffalo. And I will say, I don't like what I've done here. I would actually do Mount each time, so lucky catch. To Mount Buffalo in a wheelbarrow in 8 days or less. Both men trained for almost 2 months. So I said before 3 weeks. I think that there's a little bit of creative license around the amount of time, but the reason I went with 2 months here is because it's been documented in other areas in the Burke Museum catalogues. So both men trained for almost 2 months before the event, and in that time gained a sponsorship with Dunlop Tyres, as well as national and international media attention. The event took place from the 15th to the 23rd of June 1935, with Parkinson successfully pushing Evans the 82-kilometre distance and 1,350 metre or 4,430 feet altitude in the allotted time. The wheelbarrow push has become known as the Barrathon and has inspired many modern-day Barrathon fundraising events across Australia. So I've tried to capture why this photograph is interesting. So why do we care? We care because it's depicting the two people who were involved in this iconic event from the time that it was undertaken, as well as that it was a publication. So it was a media release. So I've tried to put in where it was, when it happened, why it happened, and the legacy as well. So from this point, I would start adding subjects. So for this, I would be quite specific with some of these subjects. So it's unlikely that we will have the term Barrowmen for anything that does not have something to do with this event specifically, as well as the Barrowthon, which I think I saw here. So these are terms that people have used for other records. So I would be inclined to use them as well when it is something as specific as an event like this. But I guess the balance that you have to work out is between adding subjects that will make it easier to bring up one record without accidentally making them too generic that you add so many that it brings up half of your collection. So for these, I would go very specific with the Barrathon and Barrowmen. I'd probably also even put in things like wager, because it is a term that is very commonly used in association with this event. But I would also put in Mount Buffalo. Even though we'll put it in as a location, I like to have the subjects very clear and very specific to the item at hand. So I would, just give it a go and give it a feel, as well as seeing once you start typing, it will start giving you options. So obviously in the past, people have done hashtags for certain things. I would not be doing that for these ones. I'd be putting just the subject term specifically. So for this one, for the statement of significance, once again, I've got a little text ready. So something along the lines of a really direct statement. So this photograph is part of a collection of items held by the Burke Museum that relates to the famous wheelbarrow push of 1935. So this is somewhere that it can be quite easy to get tripped up in sort of thinking about all of the different links. But this one I would really be trying to think about how to bring it back very specifically to the relationship it has with the Burke Museum. So in this case, because it is an event that's quite well-rounded, with ones that are more to do with, say, a nature location or a site, I would look into the history of that area as it relates to the, I guess, a lot of the time it'll be social history, but to the history of Beechworth in a lot of cases with the records you'll see, but really looking at what it is about that site that you can find in your research. And then the next ones here, they're drop-down lists. So for some items, this will be incredibly straightforward. For other ones, it'll be a matter of you might be ticking every single one of these because there's so much to it. But for ours, a lot of the time it's going to be historic. For these, so the social or spiritual. This one is, I would say, historic is closer for us than social or spiritual, but there could be a very strong argument that the social impact of this event has been quite high. Although I would say that the historic significance is stronger, at least for this photograph, because it is also a snapshot of what was being published in the Ovens and Murray Advertiser at that time. And the lack of link to spirituality would make me lean away from ticking this one. You might have a different argument, and I would love to hear it. So the artistic or aesthetic, this would be much more clear-cut if it was a artwork, a painting. But in this context, I don't think it matches. And the scientific or research potential. So for collections, say like our geological specimens, this would be a very clear-cut scientific or research potential for the significance. But feel free to give it a go. And as well as if you'd like to contact me with sort of your logic underpinning what you think, if there is any grey area or you're not quite sure, I'd be more than happy to talk that through as you get going through the week. And then this one, once again, is a drop-down list. So a strong provenance. So the story of from inception all the way to us obtaining the item is known and is backed with evidence. That would be strong provenance. The rarity or representativeness. So this is the uniqueness of that item. The conditional completeness. So once again, the physical condition, or whether it is one part or a whole when it comes to the item at hand. And the interpretive capacity, so the way that we could research or put on display, as well as sort of any other interpretive uses that could come from this. So a lot of the time, this could also be, so it could span from artworks to text, so documents. We have a lot of documents as well as, say, certificates that are specific to either local personalities or to events or that type of thing through Beechworth history. So that might have an interpretive capacity to it. But for this one, I would say there is a strong provenance, and it can definitely get stronger with further research. The rarity or representativeness, it isn't rare because it's a copy. So I probably wouldn't click this one. I think that the interpretive capacity is a bit higher because it is quite a story, and quite a lovely story from the area, that I would potentially lean to clicking this. But the conditional completeness, it is a copy once again, and it's questionable sort of what would be meant by completeness. It's not half of a photograph, but the completeness is not what is giving it its significance. It is just a fact that it is a whole photo. So I would probably click these two and leave it at that. At this point, because the reception is terrible up here, I would always save just to make sure that it's not lost. But at this point, are there any questions that anyone has sort of about these fields?
You have to tick something for comparative significance if you don't feel it meets any of that criteria.
I would say I would encourage you to select one. But if you really don't think that it meets any of those criteria, then I would put that in the notes as something that needs to be looked into in the future.
Thank you.
But yeah, I would give it a go. And if you're not sure, but you think maybe, yeah, no, once again, I would yeah, put that in the notes, as well as maybe just send me a message and we can have a chat about it and see if we can work through what makes sense. Yeah, and it might be that none of them do make sense. But yeah, I would say give it a go with justifying an option.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions before we keep going? Yep. Cool. So we'll keep moving on. So we'll go to provenance. So this one can be ticked. So hide all creation details from the website. I would tick this for pretty much all of these photographs at the moment, just until we can confirm that there is permission and people are happy for their information to be known. So a lot of these details won't be known for these photographs because they'll be, say, the photographer or people depicted in an image. But at the moment, I think it's best for us to just make sure that it's not on the website, because it's very unlikely to be the reason that someone is accessing from the public side, accessing this record and this photograph. And it's also something that if say research is being conducted, we have a research department in the museum that we can provide necessary information through that. Hiding it from the website doesn't mean that it is completely inaccessible, just that there's a little bit more of those checks. So the creation date, once again, this might not be known, but if it is, pop it in. I would always go with the standard 2-2-4. So for our photograph here, it isn't quite known exactly when this photograph was taken. So in that case, it's generally good practice so we know that it will be around June in 1935, because that's when the promotion was happening for the event itself. So if you know the month, but you don't know the day, you generally go with the first of that month. If you know the year, but not the day or the month, you go the first of that year. So I know that it is very likely, just from general knowledge of the wheelbarrow push, that it will very likely be June, but I don't have that confirmed enough to be confident that it wasn't May, considering the wager was made in April. So for that reason, I would go with the 1st of the 1st, 1935, until more confirmation is found. So that confirmation will go in the references, which I am going to loop back to. So the parties associated with the creation. So creator is unknown, very likely we'll be ticking this for a lot of them. But in this case, the creator is very likely Ovens and Murray advertiser. But we can see what comes up if we do this. And once again, so this is doing a search that says anything that has this, but also something else, is what the meaning of this search is. So if I search, we do have our Ovens and Murray advertiser, as well as these lovely, very similar records. So this is very common in all institutions to have, from the different ways that people have written something in freehand typing or free text typing, a little bit different. So this would be in future efforts. I would be looking to consolidate these into just the one record. So because we have a few, this one doesn't have the, and I would probably go with this to start with as the creator, but I would be writing myself a note, which I will be doing after this, to make sure that I'm consolidating them down into one. So you can click OK. And that's going to add, so that's linking to another Victorian Collections record, but that record is a parties record. So once again, the parties record is people or creators, or so it can be institutions, organizations, or individuals, but a party is not a collection item. So I've added that there because that is the origin story. We know that from the worksheet. And the places associated with the creation. So the nature of the association, I think you can say provenance. We don't know the street, except that we do from these shops. And it very likely will tell us it's Ford Street. So Ford Street, we're a very small town here in Beechworth. It was always going to be Ford Street or Camp Street, if you ask me. But the fact that it's there means that we can put in Ford Street. We can put in Beechworth. So the region I would leave out. We could put Northeast Victoria, but I jump straight to Victoria because it doesn't help us any more than the state does and the town. The country, of course, is Australia. And the details, once again, this is a field where it's been inconsistently used within the Burke Museum, but I would put something relatively straightforward, like photo taken, Ford Street, Beechworth, 1935. So this information is in other places, but it's also just capturing it together in one text as well. So we don't have these details, and at this point in time, it isn't consistent enough for it to be useful for our purposes. So I would say leave these ones off. Even if you're keen, I think at the moment the way that we use them isn't consistent enough to be useful in searches or in capturing information that is likely to be used by researchers. So I would go through there, and you can also add more places. So that would be, if you'd like to tell more of the story, then you can continue to add places that relate to the story of your item. So I'll just show you that again. It'll be the same format, and you can keep going. So this will be if there's any events in the story of your item that you could add here. So it could be that it was an exhibition. And then you can give the details, and this would be exhibited in, this exhibition at this gallery. So you can start giving more details, and it becomes more meaningful for those moments that are significant in the story of your record. And you can just keep going. So if you have endless events in the life of your record, which of course you won't for the records you've been assigned, but if you did, you could just keep adding. So then other details relating to the creation are any other details that haven't been documented already in any of the other fields. So you could start talking. So it could say, copy developed in darkroom at Burke Museum. And the reason I would put that there is because, once again, it says it in our catalogue worksheets that I swear it does. I think I can't read at the same time as giving you a workshop. But if you trust me enough, it definitely says it in the worksheets that it was developed. Hand printing darkroom. So that is the Burke Museum darkroom, and down here the printer is the Burke Museum darkroom. So then we can do provenance events, which is where I would go into more detail around this. So in here, we could look at the origin. The publication would be where I would add the details from the original photograph. So the Ovens and Murray Advertiser, and putting in the date there. And this is where I would also, once again, add that party. So even though we've added it before, I would add it again. The role would be the publisher. And we can keep going. Once again, if we don't want it to be known, because it's the Ovens and Murray Advertiser, because it's a long-standing newspaper, I would be less concerned than if it was an individual with getting permission. But I would say at the moment, I would put them to hide from the website anyway until we've conducted a proper review to make sure that it is A-OK and above board to have that information on our website. So the places, once again, this is hopefully looking very familiar by now, but it's filling in the same details for the event, and that event would be a publication. So once again, you can keep adding as many as are needed for these. And then we'd go down to acquisition. So acquisition, how it was acquired. So how did we end up with this collection item in our collection? So a lot of these will very likely be unknown as well. Feel free to put that in if there isn't any information. So presented, this is if it says presented on your catalogue worksheet. In any other circumstance, I wouldn't be putting in any detail unless it is very clearly stated. So even though this is a copy, we're also looking for how the original came into the collection as well. So for almost everyone, it'll be unknown. There's no detail saying how it ended up that a photograph from the Ovens and Murray Advertiser became part of our collection. So I would say it is unknown, but it is something that we can research and hopefully find more details. So the date acquired, once again, if you don't have that information, don't add it. And the acquired from, so this is if you were lucky enough to have, you know, Mrs. blah, 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 and she very kindly gave her email and her phone number. Any information is put here, but I would say you will almost never have enough information to fill these fields. More and more if it is recent, we will, but at the same time, I don't know that it is necessary to have their full address in our register here anyway, so I think it's okay to not necessarily have that as top priority for research if we don't have this information on hand. So the acknowledgement has been acknowledged. This is whether it's been acknowledged that the item, for example, if it was donated, whether we've let them know that it has been accepted into our collection. So I would leave these blank unless you know for sure that we have contacted the person or people who have transferred the collection item into our collection. So other details, this is anything else that any other information that you have about the acquisition that didn't fit in any of the other fields. So then we also have, I'll just go back up to references just to make sure this was clear. So as we go through and we finish these up and we use these, as we go, I think as you're doing it, that'll be the time that's best to add this information rather than letting it potentially be lost in the overall research. I like to just make sure that as I'm finding resources and building the context, just adding these quite regularly, making sure that this information is there, and then going back to the field that I was in. So you don't need to save at this point, but that's you can just continue moving, making your way through these fields. So that's sort of an overview of where we're up to. I will stop sharing just for now and just see, are there any questions sort of about that process any of the, I guess, quirks within it that you'd like to ask at this point.
I had a few questions just based on last week, so I just wanted to check
Yeah,
if that's
absolutely.
okay. I've got a number of stereoscopic images, and in I think it's in the identifiers tab where it's got item type. Can I put stereoscopic photograph, or do you just want photograph?
No, I think it'd be if you're 100% sure, which with the stereoscopic photograph you will be.
Yeah.
No, it is that, then I would be putting in stereoscopic photograph.
And then when you're writing the physical description, well, I can kind of see that they're on card. Like on my catalogue notes, there's nothing about whether it was printed or developed and if it was actually on card. So I've just left all that information out and just assumed, because I don't actually know. That's fine.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think the thing to avoid is any assumptions in there. So even if it really looks quite right, unless you're 100% sure, I would go that way. And then that is something that we can, if we're continuing to build information in the record, we can check the physical item and say, yes, that is printed on.
And
this type
then,
of
sorry,
card.
just one more question.
Yeah.
And then you're happy for me to list everything as do not share until we get to our copyright section. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah,
that
and
would be
the media?
fantastic.
Yeah, cool. All right, I'm done.
Great. Thank you. No, thank you for those questions. Is there anything else that needs clarifying? And remember, you can ask questions the whole week and throw them in Trello or contact me at any time. So
I have a question that's actually not related, but before I forget, if I could ask.
absolutely.
I don't know if it's just me and I'm kind of losing the plot slightly, but I can't access the YouTube link that from last week's Zoom thing.
Okay.
I'm one of those people that learns through doing. So I was going to watch the video again while I was doing it, but I couldn't access it. It said it was on private, and I tried logging in with my student email, but it didn't seem to work. Yeah.
Has anyone else had that issue or tried to access the video?
Yeah, I had it as come up private as well.
Oh,
you did?
okay.
I only just noticed it last night, so I didn't mention it.
No, that's totally fine. I'll look into that and I'll make sure that it is accessible, because that'll be, yeah.
Yeah, because that way I can just double check that I've.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
The other thing I did also while I've got you is I just opened up some other entries, items in Victorian collections, just to kind of get an idea of what they had entered. Is that okay? As a
of course.
comparative.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So
hopefully they weren't incorrect and I've done the wrong thing, but
yeah, well, that's the thing, that it's I guess an evolving space, and I'm still looking at ways to channel everything into more consistency. But I would definitely be, if you're someone who benefits from having a look and seeing what's around, I would encourage you to do so. So that's completely fine. Yeah.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. Yeah, and I'll go through and double check everything as I learn more as well. It's that thing of it's a bit of the process.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's all good. And I will as well say thank you for the Trello image competition. There's some fantastic photos in here that are incredibly hard to choose from when it comes to a best photo, because you've all sort of taken it in different ways. And so I think I will say it's a pretty tough one. I think that having Amelia having a photo with two people kissing on a bench and someone sleeping on the other side is incredible, and very perfectly timed. I did also want to know more. I saw, Finn, that you've actually picked from the Burke Museum collection, and it's an image that I haven't seen before. But I was wondering if you had any information on this perfectly timed fight scene that looks very military. But do you have any further information on that?
Yeah, I found it on the state library, resources. So I didn't even know that it was from the Burke Museum until now. But yeah, there was pretty limited resources. It just said it was in Western Australia, and it was army generals or something like that wrestling.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wish I knew more.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's definitely an image that you can see sort of what's very likely happened immediately after. But they were all fantastic. I will say, Athena, I think for this one you might be the winner just because of how, and I would encourage you all to have a look at each other's, but the incredible capture of this plane, I would say almost hitting a car. It's a pretty incredible photo to be able to capture. But would you like to tell us any more about this image? I can also, if you don't mind, share my screen so people can see it.
Yeah, sure. I only know it's from the State Library of Queensland, and now I'm noticing I have a bit of a thing with cars, vintage cars going on from last week as well. But yeah, it's just a tiger moth taking off, and I was kind of when I was looking at photos, I was kind of like amazed by how early cameras could capture like those sort of close call moments. Because there are a few others I was
Absolutely.
looking at because I don't know if I try and take a photo with my phone, sometimes it's too fast and it can't grab. So I'm trying to imagine like a plane taking off and yeah, just someone capturing that moment was pretty neat. But yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, and you're totally right with cameras now that are so advanced. It's hard to capture something this this intense looking. But I think for this one, I think it is quite perfectly timed and quite
oh, thank
quite
you.
special. So you will be receiving something sweet in the mail.
Oh, thank you.
Which also brings me to I will let you know that you will all receive something in the mail. So I've mailed out just a couple of resources. Really, it's just a bit of a thank you for participating, and will hopefully assist with some of that research. But if you don't receive anything in the mail in the next week, please let me know. I might ask in our next workshop just to make sure, because then I will need to follow that up. But I will also give you your next image. So I thought it might be good, and maybe it's a little bit outdated. I still think, Netflix, the streaming platforms count as TV. But if you would like to pick something that's the best memorable or iconic TV moment for our next week's competition, that would be fantastic. I've picked something that is iconic from my childhood. I used to watch America's Next Top Model quite religiously. This is from 2005. Feel free to look up Tyra Banks dressing down Tiffany on her exit from the show. Doesn't have to be something as ridiculous, but it can be whatever you'd like, or however you'd like to read that. But that is everything from me. I thought I'd add just a little bit of a photo to say goodbye from the taxidermy freeze that has successfully been completed at the Burke Museum. So 160 taxidermies have been double wrapped in bags, sealed up, and put in the freezer for the next couple of weeks. And this is a beautiful bald eagle that I feel like wanted a selfie, but I might be anthropomorphizing. But this was quite an arduous task, but very successful with myself and three other team members. So so thought I'd share. But that's everything from me. So thanks for joining workshop 3, and let me know how you go with the records. They'll be the same records from the last workshop. And yeah, just with the new fields. So thanks again, and I will see you in, I've said next week, but am I right in thinking that you have next week off? I will see you in 2 weeks. But yeah, we won't run it during your break. Excellent. All right. See you in 2
Thank
weeks.
you.
Have a lovely
Thank
break.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.